remember to put your phone on silent?
What? No.
That's an audio episode.
Really?
You probably don't even have your phone.
No, I have it. It's silent.
All right,
It's
well.
silent. I'm smart enough for that.
It's 3 o'clock.
3
Today it is Thursday.
What episode are we on now?
141. Yeah, episode 141.
Well,
Today we're talking about live audio streaming. And I actually forgot the wireless keyboard that I was going to use for switching. So, Michael, you get to do that today.
Well,
And
at least
away we go. All right, well.
Welcome to Live at Epiphan. Join us every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live show talking about a whole slew of different topics.
That's right.
As you did mention, of course, we are talking about audio today, more specifically audio fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And look at that. Even if we were looking at we were sitting in the wrong seat today, too.
Oh, no, that's okay. Was the title right? Did I get the host ones right? Was that up there and it was backwards?
Well, that's okay. We're talking about audio today anyways. The visuals don't really matter. So we're
well, and that's a really good point. That is kind of the theme of this episode is the fact that if you have bad audio,
everything's ruined.
Everything's ruined. If you have bad video, it's kind of okay. It's going to be, especially with live, right? It's going to break up. It's going to drop. You're going to have a bad signal. It's going to come and go. But if the audio is bad, no one's going to want to watch it.
That's true. Audio, surprisingly enough, for a visual medium, counts for about 80 to 85% of the actual experience. Without the audio portions, the audio segments, of having good quality audio segments, your viewers, your listeners, they're all going to disappear. Everyone's willing to sacrifice some video for audio, but the opposite can't be said. Same thing if you've got a video audio sync issue, or if your audio is just really crunchy or it's overblown. There's lots of things. So we're going to cover a few things today, but maybe the first thing we should start off with is maybe a little bit of a roll call.
Yeah, we're going to do a roll call. So we see David Larson Photo is in there. Hello, Epiphan community. Hello, David Larson Photo. Faithful Mess, nice to see you back again. And I do look a little bit different. Been wearing the glasses. Maybe all of our videos will be in focus now, because I'll actually be able to see if they're in focus or not. But that's a whole other thing. But Faithfulness, thank you for noticing. It's good to have you back. Danny Grissel, yes, the names were reversed. He already called us out on
All right,
that.
perfect. Yep.
It's very quick, very quick. Yeah, LOL, Danny Grissel. And Kim Sorensen. Kim, I was trying to reach out to you. I assumed that you would have the contact button on your YouTube channel, which you don't have activated, but that's okay. So I commented on one of your videos saying, hey, I'm trying to get in touch. So Kim, please contact us, info@epiphan.com, and send some proof, I guess, that you're Kim Sorensen. I don't know how I'm going to authenticate that, but we'll see. Send a photo of yourself with today's newspaper.
Oh, that works, yeah.
Or that's for ransoms. I'm not sure.
Or it's for just making sure this is real, yes. This is exactly
it's a
what
real
I have
person
here today, yes.
But Kim, please get in touch, because you did win that Buddy Pass from last week, and I am eager to share it with you so I can play Tomb Raider with somebody. Other than George. You don't want to play video games with George online.
Kim's going to be better than you. Are you okay with that?
Why do you think Kim's going to be better?
Buddy.
Because he's Scandinavian?
Everybody's better than you.
No. Well, it's not. If they had Mario Kart on Stadia,
okay, that's
that would be a true story. All right,
that's
Kim's giving us the thumbs up. Oh yeah, and we did miss you last week, Faithfulness. You were enjoying some turkey, so you'll have to let us know if you were. I'm curious, actually. I should look at Faithfulness channel and see if she made some cool crafts for last week. I didn't catch anything on there, so I'll have to take a look.
Maybe.
Rudy Engels is tuning in from Belgium. Nice to hear from you, Rudy. We might be coming your way next year. Of course, we have ISC.
ISC in February.
Yeah, and that's in Amsterdam. Are Belgium and Amsterdam pretty close together? I don't know my European.
Not
Not really. It's a train. You could take the train.
I mean, you can take the train pretty much anywhere, but
everything's close, right? You can take a cheap flight or whatever.
Yeah, very true.
All right. Enough stalling.
All right, so let's start talking about audio for today. So we're going to be going through a few different points. The first and foremost is, does my audio suck? That's probably the first question I always ask myself when I set anything up. There's obviously going to be some few things that you're going to be aware of before you even get to where you need to be. Planning is key, right? Plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's how I've always run all of my audio gigs, even when I was in school, which I'm repping right now. No biggie. But let's get talking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a few points that are going to be very important for your success in audio. Obviously, this can be limitations on gear, what kind of space you're working with, what kind of sources you're working with, how many of them you're working with, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to go ahead and ask is if, Michael, if you could go ahead and just switch over to our other layout. All right. So the first thing I always want to know is knowing your venue, right? If you're going to be in a room like this, it might be a little bit smaller, or if you're going to be in a very large-sized auditorium, or if you're going to be in like an airport hangar. So if we're looking at this image as an example, you've got a massive auditorium hall, really high ceilings, you've got sloped floors, obviously with layered chairs, and presumably you're going to have an audience in there as well, and that's certainly going to affect some of that audio quality. Even as much as even right above you on the stage, being able to see things like, oh, let's take a look at the curtains right in between. Those are also going to be reflective surfaces where you're going to see some content. The same can also be said if I was going to switch over to a smaller room. You'll notice here that the room is probably only about 8 to 9 feet tall in terms of tiles, maybe 10 feet. The room is also much shorter, and there's no sloped floors. We don't have to worry about any sort of major reflection issues here.
So what about this room has been set up, do you think, specifically for that purpose of doing like having good audio, making sure it's not reverberating everywhere?
Well, this is a pretty standard, what you would see is kind of like as an office setup. So for those of you that are actually looking at the screen right now, you'll notice that there's a simple projector along the ceiling. Along the back, you've got some basic walls that looks like they might be a little bit, protected with some sort of cushion or some sort of fabric, maybe not felt or anything, something of that nature. But you'll notice that obviously that there is a little bit of, let's call it, dampening qualities that are there.
So what kind of room do you think this is just from the photo?
Honestly, I'd probably put this as either a kind of a spare room within an office. I could also see it typically done as like a converted, almost like the basement of like a chapel or like some sort of school. The big thing that makes me very happy is the fact that there's a carpet on the ground. So any flat reflective surface is always going to give you a little bit more of a headache. And you want to try to avoid that in every instance that you can. The more control you have over your room and your space, the better your quality of audio is going to be at the end of the day, because you don't have to worry about reverb, echo, or other additional noise that might be coming from elsewhere.
And even, I mean, those chairs themselves have probably been selected so that will help with the sound dampening. And like you mentioned, that wall at the back looks like it's made of something kind of soft too. So
yeah, so the chairs is, I think that's more of a just what we have available scenario necessarily. But yeah, typically you'll notice the chairs, if you go to like an amphitheater or something of that nature, they're always cloth, they're always padded, not only for comfort, but they're there to also, absorb sound so much, a little bit more, so that you're not getting that extra reflection.
If there's bouncing everywhere, right?
So if someone's not in their seat, if they didn't completely sell out, it's not going to be a whole bunch of more reflections that people have to work with.
Right on.
Oh, by the way, guys, if you guys have any questions throughout the show, please throw them in the comment section. Cameron and Michael will be monitoring this periodically, and we'll be happy to answer them as we go. Okay, so you've got an idea now of what size of room you have, but then we start running into room noise, right? So as we're talking about room noise, we're talking about the reflections from the ceiling, from the walls, from the floor, off of different surfaces. If you're working with a band, reflections off of the drum kit, off of the face of a guitar. It could be
Even
off
the face of the guitar would matter?
Everything matters.
See, I feel like that's such a small area.
You'd be surprised.
But that makes sense,
You'd be surprised. I mean, we have some basic sort of acoustic baffling around the studio here that's kind of been strategically placed out just to give you a little bit more dampen of a sound, and we've got our acoustic blankets that are hanging from the ceiling to make sure that we're not getting sound from
acoustic
elsewhere.
moving blankets.
Moving blankets, moving. Hey, they're acoustic for me because they still dampen sound.
When you're done moving, you just put them up on the wall. And then we've got dampening. It's
there
perfect.
You go, perfect. And then you can also use it if you want to move your audio equipment at a later date. But all this to say is the size of room is also going to affect those reflections, and it's also going to bring into the next section, which is technically called acoustics. So as you'll notice here from this graph, the red dot on the right-hand side is talking about the source. So this is basically saying, I'm the speaker standing on a stage as an example, and it's going to this receiver situation. In this case, it would be the audience, right? There is the direct sound that you're going to get, which is that red line you see on the left-hand side. And then you have your early reflections and late reflections. So early reflections would be, bouncing off maybe one, maybe two walls to get to where that person is going to be or that recipient is going to be. And then you have your late reverberations or late reflections that will bounce off multiple surfaces, probably multiple times before it reaches. And that's where you get reverberation, that's where you get echo problems, and this is where you start getting the headaches of, why do I say hello, hear everybody talking in the room when you're hoping it would be quiet, and then also hearing yourself kind of doubled up.
So the most amount of energy is in the shortest amount of time. and then as it bounces around, it gets more concentrated, or is that just the end? It's just because everything's closer together at the late reverberation stage there.
So when you look at a late reverberation, you're talking about how many times is basically that reverberation going to hit that receiving source.
Okay.
So if I was to say hello at one end of a room and put a microphone on another end, the late reverberations and the early reverberations refer to how many times or how long does it take for that sound to reach that specific source. Right? So if you need a really well-controlled studio, most of the time you're going to have some sort of acoustic dampening. You might have acoustic paneling, or we've seen even the make-it-yourself DIY MacGyvering of egg cartons on a wall, right? Because they have little cone sections that help deflect audio signals and sound to different areas of the room that won't necessarily come back to that specific microphone or audio source. So knowing the size of your room is going to help you determine how many surfaces you have to reflect off, how far away that reflection is going to be. It's going to tell you roughly, like you can go through the whole math if you want, but I don't expect everyone to do that every single time. I like to use a simple clap test. Clap, wait how long to see it takes for that clap or that sound to reverb and stop. The longer it is, obviously, the less control you have over your audio sources. So clap test is great in a pinch. And also,
is that a skill that you've developed? Like, because we've done tests before, and you or Adam will be clapping away, and I can't hear it, but you can actually hear, like, how quickly that's reverberating or what the echo is.
Yeah, so you kind of get an idea. Basically, if you're in a big room similar to the first image that I had shown, if you clap, you're going to have a little bit of that, kind of like a little, almost like kind of drummed roll off. And in an average size room, probably like the one that I was showing there, you're probably going to look at about half a second to a second from the time that I finish clapping to the time that the sound disappears in the room. Now, you also need to consider that the more bodies you have in the room, the more sound is going to be absorbed into clothing, into people's hair, into their body, that kind of thing, so it's going to be less reflection there as well. So an empty room is going to be very different than a live room.
Now, we do have a comment here from Danny.
Yeah.
Just not able to actually promote this one up, so maybe Michael can throw it up for us. But he was saying how, or would you agree with this, that a $5 mic, if it's properly placed, would outperform like a way more expensive mic if it's not being placed correctly?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, a $5 microphone, probably not, because there are some things within a microphone that are very important. There's 3 things you need in order to be able to create a proper signal. You need a magnet, you need an electromagnetic field, and obviously you need movement, right? So the diaphragm is going to move within the microphone, which is going to create
What's called a monoprice
right. Let's talk
then,
about
example.
So we'll take something that's relatively inexpensive, let's say under $50 or under $100, compared to like a $6,000 Neumann microphone that you spend your entire life savings on because you really needed this. If you have someone who's skilled and able to correctly mic a room, that's able to correctly map out what kind of reflections they're going to have, regardless, if you take someone who's never held a microphone in their life and they stick it in the middle of a room that's full of noise that can capture everything around them, it's not going to be as good no matter what as the guy who's it's got the $10 to $100 microphone and sticks it perfectly in the room. I would rather have mediocre or mid-level equipment and know how to use it perfectly than have really expensive equipment and not have the skill set or the knowledge to know what to do with it.
Yeah, fair enough, right? Fair enough. And that's why we bring Matt in all the time. If we have an audio question, if we're having difficulty, even our sound check, every week we bring Matt in, and then I do something to mess it up, and Matt has to come and run back over and fix it again. But Matt knows his stuff, and yeah, it helps to have someone that's actually knowledgeable, because then it's easier to set up, and you can use those less expensive microphones.
Now, the important thing, too, is, I'm not perfect at my job, and nobody will be, but as long as you're learning from them, that's the important part. So that includes even doing things like, we've tested using a different audio mixer. So we've gone from a completely standard analog audio mixer to something a little bit more IP-based. Now, if we have time at the end of the show, we might show you a little bit of that, or I might throw that into maybe the blog post or a forum post that we have up and running.
And actually, just on a side note, before we kind of dive into more about knowing your audio source, is we do have a forum post right now. So if you have had any audio experiences, any MacGyvering situations, any issues that you had to overcome, share them with us. We'd love to hear about it, and we could turn that into some other content as well if you want to explore and share.
It's also a great place for you guys to ask me questions. So I specifically threw up that forum post with the intention of being able to answer some of those questions, right? done a couple of blog posts in the past around audio that people are asking questions all the time, and I love the feedback, guys. It really helps, and obviously it makes me really happy to talk about audio. So anytime you guys have a question that's audio related, and especially if it's audio related to our products, I'm more than happy to answer them and go through them and help break that down.
Right on. Now let's get into more about knowing your audio sources. And Danny did have a good question about what kind of microphones we're using for the show, and we'll jump into that in a few minutes. We have another section where we actually get in a little bit more about gear and knowing gear and whatnot. So let's talk about knowing the audio sources a little bit more.
Sure. So you've got your room set up, you've got everything else figured out that you really want to do. The next thing you really kind of need to know is, while you have these audiences, right? So you have these large audiences in this possible amphitheater, or maybe you've got just a couple of people in a large room or just a couple of people in a small room. You're obviously going to want to know what sources you're going to use. And that, first of all, means how many sources are you going to use? Are we looking at one person is standing on a stage, something like a Tony Robbins type figure who sits in a crowd of 1,000 people in these massive auditoriums or like airport hangar type places to give these phenomenal speeches? Or are you going to be running into a situation where maybe you're talking to a panel of people? So instead of having a single microphone, you've got 4, 5, 6, who knows? You've got a few things that you need to juggle with, and knowing how many sources you have is going to greatly assist you in knowing what you need.
Well, and this kind of panel setup too, right? If you come into this with one mic, you're going to have a hard time, right? Because these folks are going to want to talk. They're going to talk over each other. They can't be passing a microphone back and forth. You can't have one shotgun mic, directed at everyone. It's not going to work out.
And that takes time. Now, the other thing to also consider too is, once you know, let's say, how many sources you're going to need. So let's take this panel of 5 people here. So you've got 5 microphones. You need to make sure that you have those 5 sets of cables. Now, you also need to know, because of the size of your room, how far do you need to run those cables, right? Am I doing a small room like our live studio, which is, isn't like 80 feet deep? We don't need that much space. From here to the board, we've got maybe, 10, 15 feet. And on top of that, we got to make sure we have enough slack so that we're not tripping over it.
Well, and also, not to go against what you said, but we do have to worry about safety concerns, especially in the studio here, because we have a lot of traffic coming and going. So even though it's 10 feet, kind of how the crow flies across the table, I have to run 30 feet of cable all the way around through these channels and then up underneath the floor and stuff. So it may look like it's close, but then when you actually go to run the cable, it's like you can't just do a straight line across there.
Now, this is just us talking about, having a panel or a person or people on stage having a conversation, but I'm sure some of you guys out there are like, well, what if I want to do, record a band, right? Am I going to be recording, a few instruments from, let's say, a live jazz group, kind of like we have here? So this is Prime Rib, actually one of our faithful managers are actually part of this group.
This is a really fun show, and this was a great example of how we were able to accomplish a really strong audio stream. So we had a live stream. We did it with a Pearl Mini last December from Irene's Pub just here in Ottawa, and we had a really, really awesome quality on the audio. But because we were shooting in a real mixed light situation, we couldn't put up stage lights, obviously, because these guys had their stage lights already. We couldn't do more lights on top of that. They're all wearing white in that very dark room, so it got blown out very quickly. So we had great audio, not the best video for this one. But we can get into that a little bit later.
But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So if we're looking at a band here, right, I've got a few microphones there that are up front. If you're doing like a rock band or something, then you're going to have guitars, you're going to have amps, you're going to have a drum kit. So there's a lot more sources you need to be aware of. And knowing the number of those sources and knowing where that cable is going, or where all of those cables are going, are hugely important. So I've got my sources. I now have cables I need to be aware of. Like, am I using a DI box? Right? If I'm using.
And what is a DI?
So
DI
kind
box?
of like a direct injection box is basically. It's one of those things that, and that'll bring me into the next point after that actually, is it has the ability to take let's say a patch cable from like a guitar or a guitar amp, and it plugs into this DI box, which changes an unbalanced signal to a balanced one. So taking it from a standard TS quarter-inch cable that can only go up to roughly about 20 feet before you start getting a lot of noise into the signal, and changes that to a balanced, grounded, shielded XLR cable that can run 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet, wherever you need it to run. Much further distance and a much cleaner signal. So being able to know what sources you have and what tools you have at your disposal will greatly impact the quality of audio that you're going to get.
Now, I should mention, Matt actually wrote an article about the differences between balanced and unbalanced XLR cables, or cables, I think audio cables in general. So if you are interested in learning more about that, we're going to throw a comment in our live chat, and we'll also have a comment in the description at the bottom of this video. So make sure to check that blog out and get a little bit more information about it.
Yeah. So when we're getting into the gear, right, knowing your gear, and we're talking about balanced and unbalanced, there was a nice little kind of grid or image that I found online that I couldn't help but use, and it's just kind of comparing some of these different signal types and these connection types. So we've got things like, and this is old school, right? ADAT and FireWire.
Is ADAT like the fiberglass?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. That's not right. Fiberglass?
It's fiber optics.
Fiber optic. Yeah, there we go. Fiberglass.
But we're talking about ADAT and FireWire and SPDIF RCA, right? Those are typically not used anymore.
You skipped over one there in between. What's the?
Now the one in between that we're talking about USB. Now USB is making quite a bit of comeback for the audio scene, right? We're talking about digital UVC style boards like Behringer might have, or you might have just a digital source that you're plugging in to USB to the mixer. That's becoming more and more popular nowadays as well. So I don't want to exclude that, but I'm skipping over it, saying it has relevancy now that it may not have had in the past.
Cool.
And then after SPDIF and RCA, we start getting into the things that we know and love today, like XLR, which is the industry standard when it comes to audio. Then we have BNC style connectors. So basically twist and lock style connectors. Now you'll most commonly see BNC connectors with SDI physical cables.
It does look like an SDI connector. Is that the same kind of connector as an SDI?
Yeah, so SDI is what's known as has a twist and lock connector. Now there are really thick, amazing cables that are used typically with big studio speakers or big what's the word I'm looking for?
Production speakers?
Thank you. That will typically have a twist and lock. So you push it into place, and then a nice big piece locks it into place. So if that speaker gets moved or pushed over, you don't have to worry about anything becoming unplugged. And then we run into TS and TRS. So tip sleeve and tip ring sleeve. So obviously TRS has that little extra ring, which is also used for ground. So you're looking at an unbalanced and then a balanced signal. So TS being unbalanced.
Would that also give us like mono versus stereo, like left and right in that TRS, or is that what the ground is? Is that how that works?
Stereo will typically be balanced, so TRS.
Cool.
TS, you're typically looking at a mono signal, something like a patch cable from maybe a keyboard or from a guitar or a bass.
Electric guitar.
Typically you would see that.
Cool.
And then RCA and MIDI. RCA being what you would typically see, as a consumer line level signal, right? You 3.5 millimeter out of like your cell phone or a tablet, or if you've got an old iPod, into USB on the other end, or into an RCA port into a mixer or something that you're trying to get music for a specific event. And if you want to roll it back a little bit more, you can even go as far as say phono, which was very popular with turntables.
Phono.
Yeah.
Is that the same as fear of missing out?
Not quite.
FOMO?
No, not FOMO. Phono.
Phono.
Think like telephone, but with an O at the end.
Don, if you're still watching on Facebook, thanks for tuning in. We just checked out your message there, all the way from San Diego.
San Diego, I like that place. So knowing what kind of cables you need is going to be very, very beneficial for your success. And again, I wrote that blog a little while ago for Balanced versus Unbalanced. I recommend everyone to read it if you want a better understanding of how it works and why it could be beneficial for one situation or another. Typically, balanced cable is what you're going to use for any speaker, any sound system, because you're already looking at something that you want to be able to run at a very long distance with fidelity.
Yeah, you're not going to be 10 feet away from the mixer, right? The mixer's in another room on another floor, like 1,000 feet away. Danny had a comment on YouTube.
Yes.
So he's saying, throwing this out there, excuse me, Danny had another comment. Danny's been very active today.
It's okay.
So Danny's commented, human bodies act as a baffle in a room also. You need to evaluate acoustic spaces as they will be during performance and not empty. And that's exactly what you pointed out earlier with knowing your venue. So we had an example, there's like a few people in a giant auditorium, right? And just like a few folks maybe doing an audition, or maybe they're just for like just in the small space, maybe it's not sold out, maybe it's not a very popular event, but it's definitely a huge component, right? Knowing how many people are going to be there.
And actually, funny enough, and I'm going to put on my, I'm stepping out of a little bit out of the topic for a split second just to talk about this very quickly, since Danny, you did bring it up. Yes, people do act as baffles, which also means that some of that sound is also not going to reach your audience this further back. So if you're in a very large space, you need to make sure that you have speakers strategically placed about midway through, right, or 3/4 of the way through, depending on how far that room is, in order to accommodate for, and you're going to need, latency. It might be very small, might be 20 milliseconds, but you're going to have to delay that music or have a delay for the front end very, very slightly so that the audio comes at both ends, or at the front and the back, at the exact same time.
And I never considered that, because the speed of light, right, the speed that you can actually see the performance when you're at the very back of the concert hall is going to be affected by the speed of sound, which is coming through those speakers. So if you're getting that immediately, you're going to see that. It's going to be enough to throw it off. I never thought of that. That's a really good point.
Yeah, things I learned when I was in school. But
I guess.
And then for every, I think it's like 200 people, you need to add 2 decibels of volume for your overall master. And fun fact, if you guys are active goers of loud rock concerts, earplugs. Invest in them, they're very worth it, because it'll...
What's that?
Exactly, yeah. For those of you that actually want to know, and you don't need to be scared, but just something to be aware of, it only takes 4 minutes of direct exposure from loud concerts to get permanent hearing damage. And it's things you won't notice for 20 years, but literally for 4 minutes, that's it.
Now, Danny did have a question earlier. He was asking what kind of gear we're using, so I may as well bring that up now. Mike, or sorry, if you want to explain a little bit more, Matt, about the setup that we have, we'll start with our lav kit.
Sure. So what we're actually using is, well, at least this microphone is. I'm not sure about that one. So it's.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish. We have 2 of the same wireless transmitters that came with 2 different microphones.
Yeah. So typically you want to have everything matching. So you might notice that on this live stream, I have a little bit of a boomier voice, right? I have a little bit more bass and deep end and mid-level that we try to address with EQ, compared to Cameron, who has a little bit more, almost like space and depth to his, a little bit more mid-range, a little bit more high-end compared to me. So mine's going to be a little bit deeper sounding than you overall. But yeah, we're using Sennheiser style lavs and the mic packs, right? The AVX MK2, something like that?
MKE2?
MKE2,
yeah,
okay.
you're pretty close on the acronym, but really cool little kit. It was actually new in the last couple of years. The reason that we picked these ones out, because we do a lot of shooting out in the field, and so instead of having like a big bulky receiver, these guys just have a tiny little receiver that plugs right in via XLR.
Yep.
So if you're bringing in audio onto a camera, or like we're bringing it onto the deck, you don't have to have a transmitter sitting next to it on the counter. It's not, tethered to your camera or hanging off the camera.
Yep.
It just plugs right in there too. And it does have a feature where when you plug it in, if there's phantom power, it'll detect that. It actually protects itself from getting blown out.
Now, things to also consider, and I'll just make that as a side note, that if you are using anything that's wireless, you need to make sure that you're setting that up ahead of time too, right? Anticipating any sort of interference from other electrical signals is going to have a huge impact. Yeah. And it may not sound like there's anything, but if any of you guys have a guitar out there, just grab a TV remote and just put the remote right by your guitar, like right near the pickups while it's on, and then just press any button. All you're going to hear is.
Oh, interesting.
Sorry, so you can get interference from different electrical signals no matter where you are.
Now, before we go to our last section of the show, why don't we just quickly touch on our mixer? Because we have been using a different kind of mixer. We are slowly getting into this IP one, so why don't you just tell us about that real quick? And then, Michael, if you can toggle over just to our mixer board layout on there.
So we are using, or we're at least trialing, or continuing to use at this point, the Soundcraft mixer. Now, I don't remember the exact model, but it is an 8-channel mixer. Now you'll notice here that you have quite a few channels that you can play around with. This is the main screen that you're going to see. So I am channel 1, and Senior Cameron there is channel 2.
Channel dos.
Channel dos.
So this is the UI12.
UI12. Okay, so it's a 12 channel officially.
Okay, cool.
So my mistake. So you'll notice in the top left-hand corner in orange, we've got like a mix gain button. So if we were to click on that, it'll switch us over to the other page where you'll notice these are the channels that we actually have available. And this is where you would adjust your input gain, right? So how loud your signal is as it's coming into the board. And this tells you basically if I've got a clear signal, if I've got a very weak signal, if I really need to give it a lot of different gain. Now, you'll notice here that obviously mine is set a little bit quieter. I do naturally talk a little bit louder than you, Cameron. So
you get excited.
I do. Yeah. So you've got a little bit more input gain there to accommodate, so that we're trying to get at the exact same level if we're talking to the board. So as an example, I'm talking, and I'm kind of like at the same point on the board, but if I stop talking and you start talking.
Oh, like right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I missed my very obvious cue from you there.
That's okay. Yeah. That for the most part, we're roughly around the same point on the meters.
Cool.
So if we switch back over to the mix page there, then we start looking at the actual mix, right? So how loud is that person or how loud is that instrument going to be in the overall output on the mixer?
Cool.
And basically, if you've got a bunch of levels that are pushed up really high and you're noticing that master out is really loud, then you can just grab all of them and pull them down very slightly.
But you have to use your mouse.
Well, I
so
mean,
you can't really bring them
there's
all
other things
down
too, like
sometimes.
aux, which is, or it's known as a bus, right? And you can assign them all to a single fader and then just pull that down. So if you've got if you've got like a drum kit and he's just being really loud, but all of his sounds great, just pull him down in the mix a little bit, and that's the end of it. And then other things that we have with this board that we didn't have before is there's an edit feature button at the top, which allows you to look at things like your EQ. It's over in red, right? So we can adjust that mix accordingly. And then we've got things like your dynamics, or DYN, D-Y-N, which is looking at the compressor. So you'll notice that green bar we have is a gate. So saying anything under that level essentially just gets cut out completely.
Oh, this line here.
Yeah, this line there.
Gotcha.
And then you can choose how much compression you want to use, if you want it to be aggressive or not. And then we start looking at effects, right? And then we can add things like chorus or flange or reverb if we want to add some little extra
Can I put the
room
reverb
depth.
on right now?
I mean, you can try. I don't know if I've actually configured that properly, so I don't think anything's actually happening at the moment.
Are we echoey right now?
I don't think so.
Probably not. Okay.
No.
Let's not. I'm not going to mess around with that anymore. All right. So let's get into the last little bit about our audio fundamentals for today.
Right.
So
if you're not just doing a live event, right? If you're talking about either recording this audio or streaming this audio, one of the things you're going to need to know is obviously your audio encoding settings.
very important.
Typically, most platforms, YouTube, Facebook, will typically want a relatively low bit rate, right? You don't need a huge amount of information with audio, but again, it really depends on the platform. It really depends on what you're trying to record or stream. There are two different scenarios where you might want to use less versus more. So maybe you'll have a low sample rate scenario where you might want to just have a single talking head or maybe just a couple of people having a conversation. But if you're trying to, let's do a full jazz piece, right? This could be 20, 30 people, or even just this beautiful rock band. You're going to want to make sure that you have all that information that's captured so it sounds good. So you're going to want a higher sample rate to capture more information.
And is that what those steps are in this graph? Is that like kind of a visual demonstration of how the sample rate
A little
works?
bit. This kind of works a little bit as a bit depth versus bit rate. So bit depth is how many points of reference do you have on a specific wave file.
Okay.
And then bit rate talking about the number of times you're taking a reference sample. That gets a little bit more on the technical side. We don't really need to go into that as much, but if you guys do want a little bit more information about that, you can always look at bit depth versus bit rate, or again, we've got that forum post on the community forums. I encourage you guys to jump in and throw your questions in. Talk about those crazy scenarios where you had, well, this is the challenge I had, this is how I fixed it, and this is how I'm going to move forward with this. And it's great just because, you can talk about these little situations that you had and you're helping someone else out in the community when they get to look this over.
Cool.
I have my own sets of experiences, but they're going to be very different from what you guys have based on the equipment that we use, the room that we have, and also just the headaches we have. Like what happens if something stops working? You want to make sure you have backup equipment.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had that happen a couple of weeks ago. That's actually why we're using this networked mixer right now. With the what was it, 4 channels just died on there, right?
four out of the 8 just suddenly stopped working.
Yeah.
Now, we did get them up and working again after we rebooted the mixer, but I don't really know if I want to trust it anymore.
Yeah, that's strike one. Sorry.
Right.
And it's a one-strike system.
Yeah. So I guess lower bit rate versus higher bit rate based on the content you're trying to generate. So if you're using something like Pearl as an example, you notice under the encoding settings that you will absolutely have settings for what sort of profile you want to use. If you want to use AAC, if you want to use PCM, if you want to use MP3 audio, and then what your rate's going to be at 44.1, 48 kilohertz. And
actually, Michael, if you want to jump into into that Soundcraft layout again, we can just take a quick boo at the Pearl UI.
Yep.
So this is what Matt is talking about here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit.
Right, so at the bottom of the encoding page for each individual channel, you have an audio format, which then allows you to select if you want, if you want AAC, MP3, or PCM, and then if you want stereo mono, and then obviously the last but not least is the audio bit rate. Now, if you're doing this for streaming to something like YouTube or Facebook, every platform is going to have their own recommended settings, and it doesn't mean that you have to use this as a science or as like this is the law, but most of them will typically want AAC 44, and they'll typically want 128 kilobits per second. So where it is right now is basically perfect for YouTube and for Facebook.
Cool.
So
now what happens when you don't get this right?
Well, depending on the platform, you might get an error message saying something like on Pro, we'll get input-output error.
Oh, okay.
Or you might be in the YouTube Live dashboard or on the Facebook live stream, and you might get a warning message or saying, you know, audio settings not correct, or you might run into sync issues.
Well, that's a good thing to know, that the platform, for the most cases, is actually going to tell you that you have these errors, because it knows what it's expecting, right? It's expecting one thing, and it's going to blow up if you don't get that, if it's not getting the right information that it wants.
Now, that's not always the case. I mean, I've streamed to YouTube plenty of times using, you know, 48 kilohertz audio and using something like 256 or 320. YouTube's not happy about it, but they'll still let you do it. And also, if you're doing a live stream, also hugely important that you're not going to run into copyright strike issues. Right? If you need to make sure that you have the rights to be able to play this music, because we all have that AI and that automation that's saying, look, you know, if you don't have this piece of paper that says you can go ahead and stream it, we're just going to shut it down completely immediately.
Well, and George and I have talked about that on previous episodes, or we've talked about it on a previous episode. We got into a little bit more detail. It's still super murky, right? Even having that permission may not prevent YouTube from stopping your live stream, because it is just this AI reaction. It's going to detect that music. It's going to shut you down right away. If you have a video that has copyrighted music in it that's a VOD, then it'll likely, you know, turn commercials on, or you might get a strike, but it's not going to take it off right away, depending on the strike or the condition of your actual the state of your account.
Of course. So one of the things that we did kind of talk about a little bit at the beginning is talking about how, you know, you could have really good video and really terrible audio, and what kind of experience that really gives the viewers. So I actually have a reference here to an older, not terribly older, looking at a WestJet live stream where they had pretty good video. Now, you know, please excuse us. You know, we're trying to filter this through a separate application to make this run, but you're going to listen to very annoying, very terrible, in my opinion, audio.
Oh, so turn your volume down.
Oh, I have to turn my volume down?
No, to the viewers.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming on this gorgeous Calgary morning. Thank you, Sandeep, for the warmth of your introduction and for your leadership at the helm of the chamber.
They're getting noise.
I'd like to begin this morning.
Right, or they're basically going to get some sort of just fray in the cable.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't plugged in all the way. Maybe there was a mic that they weren't using that wasn't plugged in all the way, and it was just bringing in that audio. But it was unfortunate because it was a really great announcement. It was a big announcement for the company, and the message didn't really come through. And we tried to find the video. We actually thought that it had been kind of pulled back, and we did find it eventually. And a lot of the comments were just about the audio, which is a real drag, because you want to announce something cool, you want to do this big announcement, and then you get all this focus on the audio. And we've seen that before, obviously, on our show. You know, we have something important we want to talk about, and then we see the comments about the audio not working, and it's just like, such a drag.
Yeah. Nope. And I managed to kick myself out of there. Let's see if I can put that back in there.
Speak of the devil.
Well, it's not playing, but at least we can switch to it so people can
try
see
clicking.
it.
You can try clicking one more time.
But,
there's so we did do this really cool audio stream with Irene's last year for the Prime Rib band, and that was great. And even if we could just show this still, so it's
kind of moving.
Yeah, they just weren't moving around very much.
So we muted the audio for obvious, you know, concerns of copyright or whatever else, because there are some covers that were done in this concert, but there was a lot of original pieces as well. Actually, funny enough, it's about a year ago, so there was a lot of Christmas jazz adaptations to this piece at all.
It was a fun show. It was a really good turnout, and Matt was manning the board. And so, were you mixing all of the different inputs that were coming in, or was it just kind of like a overall line from their mixer? I can't remember how that worked.
So it was kind of a split.
Okay.
So depending on where you are, right? If you're not the one that's running the show, you may need to just get an out from a specific board to your own, so that you can get your own levels and your own signals. But in our case, we actually had two separate lines. We had the back line, right, for the trombones, the trumpets, anybody else in the back, and we had the front line, and we also had an overall outline from that mixer. So I had 3 lines I could actually play with. So what I actually did was I kept the back and front lines kind of up forward in the mix, and then I put the overall mix really quiet in the back. But what I did was I actually kind of put them slightly out of phase, which is basically you're taking a waveform and you're flipping it backwards on each other. So any perfect symmetrical lines basically cancel each other out. So basically you don't get any sort of doubling up in terms of audio.
Gotcha.
So I actually got to play around a little bit with that throughout the show, and I had to maybe adjust the audio a little bit throughout the show based on how quiet a song might have been or how loud it might have been. But overall, it was a very fun show. People were very happy with the audio on the live stream.
Totally.
But again, our video wasn't the best.
The video wasn't the best. They're all wearing white shirts. It was dark venue. It was kind of blown out. I'm being a little bit defensive about the video because that was kind of my responsibility. But
listen, we've all got limitations, right?
Ooh, ouch. Now, Tim Trott, thanks for tuning in. You came in a little bit late and wanted to say hi, so thanks for watching. Tim was saying how he had a gig where he had a bad feed from just one of the audio sources. It was a wireless mic on the podium. Totally hooped him. Danny also made a comment here just about how he was actually shut down. So he let the house music bleed into a live stream, and his streams were automatically shut down. So no prejudice and no recovery.
Yeah.
So if your live stream is shut down and you're not actually recording it locally, you're not going to have access to that VOD. It's just gone.
Yep. So to sum things up, knowing what your venue is going to be, right? It's small, large, deep, tall, whatever it's going to be there. Knowing how many people are going to be in the room, right? What your room noise is going to be like. Reflective surfaces off the floor, off the ceilings, off the wall. Knowing what the audio sources you're going to need, right? Am I 2 people? Am I 6 people? Am I a giant band? Am I one person that's just going to give a speech, or am I going to be one person who's singing and dancing on stage? And then, of course, from there you need to know what sort of gear is really required. Do I need a mixer? Do I need 3 microphones? Do I need backup microphones? Do I need to make sure I have all these different types of cables? Do I need adapters? Do I need converters? Do I need a film pop so that I'm not getting all these P's and S sounds?
Is that the one that's like the...
Yep, the round circular one. Or, you know, if you're outside, then you've got the windsock or wind filters that are basically just the little knobs that, that go on top there.
That's a different one,
and then, of course, knowing what your audio encoding settings are going to be if you're recording on a specific board. So keeping those things in mind are going to be key in order to be able to get a successful audio experience, whether it's for video, audio on its own, for recording, or for streaming.
Cool. All right, Matt, well, thank you very much for enlightening us. And like Matt has mentioned a couple of times, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us at info@epiphan.com. Matt has put together our forum posts as well, so head to epiphan.com and look for our forums. That's actually in a brand new forum section that Matt's created for Live at Epiphan, so it's the very first forum post we have in there.
Yep.
Tell us about a time that you messed up. Tell us about a time that you were the MacGyver and you solved the problem, and we'd love to hear about it.
Also, if you guys have any questions, if you guys are really interested to know more about a specific audio topic, and you guys would like to see some sort of blog post, you know, the more information, the more ideas you give my way, the more I can provide back for you guys. So you can feel free to throw that into the community forums as well, or again, send us an email at info@epiphan.com.
Cool.
What are we talking about next week?
So next week, we're going to be focused back on camera stuff.
Sweet.
So we're going to be talking about beyond 4K. I want to have like a cool sound for this
like
one.
5K?
Beyond 4K, 4.5K.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, 6K, 8K, 10K. No, it's 8K. So yeah, it's literally double, because that's how the video audio industry works. It's always just double. It's just double. Because like 2K is like arguably,
right,
1080. That's 2K-ish.
Yeah,
1.8.
About that, yeah.
But yeah, we're going to be talking about how to use 8K, how to use 4K, how you can do 4K cropping. So if you only have access to one camera, you don't have a switcher, you can actually do a lot of that switching through a 4K camera, and then you can push that even further with an 8K camera. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week and the technology and how all that works.
Thank you so much for joining us this week, guys.
My name's Cameron.
My name's Matt.
Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to follow us on the socials. Click the thing.
Like and subscribe.
It's over on your side. You got to point down. Usually down there. Yeah, over down there.
Somewhere, I don't know. Somewhere.
Exactly. All right, thanks again for watching.